All right, 5 o'clock, we'll call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. We'll start with a roll call.
Ryan Shirley, District 13.
Jerry Van Zomeren, District 18.
Scott Coner, District 11.
Sean Anderson, District 2.
Royce, District 5, Hudson.
Ken Witt, County Administrator.
Jason Cheezit, Community Development Director.
Julie Peterson, Community Development Department.
All right, thank you. I'll move on to approval of the minutes. Do we have any changes or comments from the minutes? That being said, they will stand as approved. Now move on to public comment. Does anyone have? Yes, now's the time. I would ask if they are any of the 3 items that have a public hearing. So the Chapter 15 zoning ordinance, amendments to the St. County Comp Plan, or resolution to amend the master park plan for Eckert, that they wait until then. Otherwise,
Okay. It's about Eckhart.
Okay, I would wait till the 3rd public hearing then. You'll get
Thank you.
asked. Yep. Thank you. Anyone else for anything that isn't a public hearing? All right. I'll move on to business item number 1. Or we'll move on to public hearing number 1, excuse me, the proposed amendment to the St. Croix County Chapter 15 General Zoning Ordinance.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So up on the screen right here is the Class 2 public hearing notice, and that was published in the Star Observer, which is the official county newspaper for the previous 2 weeks prior to tonight's meeting. We also took and provided certified mail notices out to each town clerk, and that is part of this Class 2 notice, which is required by statute. This amendment was also initiated by a petition that our department filed on February 3rd of 2025. And just as a courtesy to the Towns Association, we've went through the changes in Chapter 15, and that at the last 2 Wisconsin Towns Association meetings. And we also provide a red line version of the ordinance to every town chair via email, and that about a month ago. So they've had plenty of time to review it. With that, we've gotten a few public comments, and so one of them I took and handed out to you here. It's from the town of Kinnickinnick, and it has to do with section 15.530, and that is the town approval and that of certain things. And they clarified some of the text, and as staff, we really don't have any objection to what they suggest. So I guess we would suggest incorporating the proposed text by the town plan commission into the amended draft. Is there any questions on that? So in other words, they would like to have the opportunity and that to review and consider conditional uses and variances if they want to at a town level. However, on that number 3B says that they are still only advisory, whereas any zoning changes and that if they are at the town level, that is really an official level, and that is so if they say no, and that we really don't even want to handle them here at the county because they can object to that ordinance amendment at the county level. So I think it's an okay change. So any questions with that one? Okay. Oh, sorry, Supervisor Rice.
All right. My question has to do with timeline. Does this stretch out any of the approval process or any of the change process for your group? I mean, if we have one more entity that's asking for some
That
This
is,
the first
isn't
we've
that
seen
more of the downfall to it potentially, is that it could be? But our staff would be just in that educating anybody that would be applying for any of these permits and that to take and go to the towns, as soon as they can and that. So hopefully it wouldn't be a huge delay. Shouldn't be any more than a month, I wouldn't think.
An additional month delay beyond what it would be under current procedure.
Correct. That would be the max, I would assume. So, yep.
Okay, so some might interpret that as additional bureaucracy, but what we're really doing here is giving more control to the town of Kinney-Connect. So I don't,
Well, and that, yeah, I should clarify, it's just not for the town of Kinney-Connect, it'd be all the towns under, and that zoning within the county, and that, but it just gives the local authorities a chance to review it, so.
well, I don't have an objection to this. I think we can review later if it doesn't work.
Yeah. And some towns might just say, yeah, we don't need to look at that, or we'll provide comment just to the hearing, So, then there was two other points. We had been working through the work group sessions and that at the committee level, and we were talking about ag tourism. And as part of that ag tourism conversation, we had in the section 15.285, which is the use table, we had a blank line going across and it had wedding venue. And we didn't actually put any permitted or conditional uses in that line. So we'd just like to strike that just because we were talking about regulating a wedding venue differently than ag tourism. And that, so that was way back last spring, I believe, when we were having that conversation. And then another comment that we had received was in short-term tourist rooming house type, and that types of uses of a home, so like your Airbnb, VRBOs. And an oversight on our part is there is the Wisconsin right to rent law, and that would have to allow Airbnb and VRBOs in the Ag 1 and the Ag 2 zoning category. And so we'd like to have those by land use permit in the use table in Ag 1 and Ag 2, just so that we comply with that. So it was an oversight on our part. Otherwise, the County Board of Supervisors was all provided with a copy of the proposed ordinance and the petition and a summary of the major changes in that within that ordinance. And that's the only comments that we have received was those three. So is there any questions of staff? Yep.
Go ahead.
To go back to the conditional use permits or the variances that Kinney-Connect is asking for, is there a way that we could change that language so that when they review any of those rezonings or whatever at that level, that's included in it so that it doesn't have that delay? So that we don't see that additional timeline added on? So I see where they're coming from and where the local ideas of conditional uses and variances go, but in reality, most of our county zoning people don't have the staff to review those, so I don't see many of our local municipalities using it, but at the same time, I don't want to suggest that we shouldn't, just because if one's asking for an ability to do it, I just don't want to see additional delays either.
Yeah, and that, now just after reviewing this text quickly here, under 2A, under procedure, maybe there's just a period after applicants for rezoning, conditional use permits, and variances shall contact the town for a review and recommendation, period. And I think the town's really not trying to do the delay because under 3B, the town's suggestion for the variance or the conditional use recommendation application is advisory only and has no impact on the public hearing schedule. That tells me that they don't want to delay it. And so, but if we strike before submitting an application to the county, then that will take and allow for both to be happening at the same time. So our staff to be able to do the staff reports, public hearing notices to be able to go out and that, but yet it's still the duty because it says shall, so the applicant shall contact the town for review and recommendation.
I think I'd rather see it where we just change the before to when. So it would be recommendation when submitting an application to the county. So on 2A,
Jason, don't we end up with an issue a lot of times where we get to public hearing and we haven't heard from the town yet?
Correct.
That's the timing issue, and that's where I thought that they were asking for it before, so that there was enough time. And I agree, I think it's gonna cause an extra month delay on most of the applications. But that was, I thought, the part that we were trying to avoid then was when we get here and we send it back to the town anyways, because they haven't made the recommendation yet. So I agree there's some timing issue, and I don't know what the answer is, but that's the other part that I was thinking about.
I'm afraid too, if we do it the way that you suggested with that period there, that it would be good if it could get to both places at the same time. But then there has to be communication between the county and the township to make sure that we're both on the same page with that, that we're both looking at that at the same time. And I'm not sure if this makes that strong enough to realize that.
Okay.
You know, because otherwise, again, we're going to do the delay. And if we leave it as it is, yes, there's going to be a delay, but at least we'll know how long of a delay. It'll be that 1 month.
So generally on any of these applications, just so the committee knows, we have a submittal day, the first Monday of the month. And then the month following that month, so it's about 6 weeks out if it's going to go to the Board of Adjustment or committee, and that is the time frame that they would have. So it is pretty good timing, so, I mean, but yes, we've had problems before where we haven't gotten town input because it just didn't hit their meetings quite right, which on any zoning change will definitely not happen again. It's just on these conditional uses and variances then.
all right, I think we can discuss this more once we get out of the public hearing. Let's go to see if any member of the public has any comments on this Chapter 15 zoning amendments. Either for or against. Any comment from the public on Chapter 15 zoning amendments? Any public comment on Chapter 15? No, then we'll close the public hearing. We'll move to business item number 1, which is the ordinance to amend Chapter 15, the general zoning ordinance. Can I entertain a motion? Go ahead, Supervisor Shirley.
I will propose a motion to approve the proposed amendment to Chapter 15 General Zoning Ordinance.
Okay, we have a second.
Second it.
Supervisor Van Summeren. All right, now let's talk about any amendments we may want to make. Go ahead, Supervisor Kenner.
Yes, I'd want to do the consideration of the change proposed by the Plan Commission in Town of Kenny for 15.530 under the recommendations.
All right, so we have an amendment proposed based on the Town of Kenny's recommendation. Do I have a second? All right.
This is not a second, it's just a point of order. I'm a little confused on the agenda, and it's probably me.
Yeah.
But we have the 3 topics for public comment, and then underneath business ordinance to amend Chapter 15. So I'm just wondering where any amendment would land.
Oh, yeah, so we're right under business item 1 right now, so the public hearing's closed.
Okay.
For item 1, and then after business item 1, we'll go to public hearing 2, business
Thank you.
item 2.
I'll second that amendment.
Okay. Any discussion on this? Go ahead, Supervisor Kenner.
Well, one of the things coming back from spending quite a few years on the town board too, the thing that becomes important is the ability to have that have the ability to make comments and things, or to be able to make the questions that the town has with a lot of these. A lot of times the town sees a lot of things and is more inept with what's going on. And so they can give some pretty decent feedback. A lot of times that helps. The one thing, though, that I know we've been discussing is the time delay thing. It can be an issue, but the part of this too is having them done at the same time. A lot of the townships rely on the staff reviews prior to their plan commission, because they don't have engineers, they don't have all of the background to be able to come up with what's necessary to put everything down. So they're very heavily reliant on our staff at the county level and to give them their opinions prior to their meetings so that they have a basis to work off from. And then they take that information and then they take what's going on in their own township and some of the things that the staff here may not be aware of, and so that they can put those together. So for that reason, I'm in agreement with what they're doing. I think it's unfortunate on timing a little, but I think part of that is just the due process, because we need to have staff here do the review before they're even going to be able to give comment for some of those towns.
All right, any other thoughts on this amendment? Yeah, go ahead.
I think that you have a good point there. I think they do depend on us a lot, so I'm not certain if this is going to make that better or not, but yeah, and I guess I almost think it should go the other way around. It should come to the county first, because as you said, Scott, they depend on the county. Many townships do it, and then the other way. Or the other way to do it is word it so they go to each at the same time, and then there's a collaboration when they're fit or done. And maybe that's the fair way.
That's currently what we just changed to, and that is that we notify them as soon as we get the applications in, you know, and that, to try to speed up that process. So, yeah.
You know,
Some towns in that want to have the input, other towns in that contract with the county to do their zoning because they don't, you know, want to have to deal with, you know, all this stuff on their agendas, so it is.
And that's part of it. We have staff and they don't, so we have, you know, every day of the week, we have 5 days a week people on staff, and that's why, it almost should come to the county first, because we can care for that and then pass it to them, which would be opposite of what they're asking for here.
Supervisor Counter, you're talking about rezones also, a rezone petition, where their town is relying on a county staff review of that? Because here under 3A, it says that it doesn't even come to the county until the town's taken action on it.
Right. Just because we don't want to tie up our staff and staff time and charge people fees and that to take and apply for a zoning change application. And that if, you know, going to the town is free, and if the town says, hey, this doesn't align with our comp plan, doesn't align with the surrounding area, and that, then there's no charge to the developer or the applicant, you know, so. And that does fall under 5969-5E, and that a town can object to the change. So that's the reason behind it, is we want to make sure they're good with it, because zoning is really a very local control type of thing. And really, and that with the 2017 Act 67 on the conditional use permits, you know, and that we have to grant a conditional use permit as long as the applicant is willing to agree to reasonable conditions as deemed by a reasonable person. And that, so, I mean, there is some, so the town is only advisory in those cases. And the variance, that's a different thing, because the statutory authority for a variance, approval or denial, and that lies with the Board of Adjustment. And so that would be something totally new that I haven't heard much of, you know, so, in other counties and stuff, so.
Go ahead, Supervisor Joey.
When reading their proposed change for 3A, I'm a little concerned because it has a sentence in there, if the town does not recommend approval, it's considered an objection. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have, Town of Richmond, I know typically does this, and one other one that they don't expressly say recommend approval, but they say that they've reviewed. So they don't say recommend approval. Well, if they don't say, according to that, if they don't say recommend approval, then it's a denial.
Right. I mean, as long as they don't appeal us, that's our intent, you know, and as long as we go through the process and they don't file an appeal, then we're good. So if they even come out and say, well, we maybe don't necessarily approve of it, but we don't object, that would be all we would need to take and at least bring the application forward. And then at that point, we would consider that application against the county's comprehensive plan and look at the same kind of criteria, so.
And then my other question would be, now that we're moving conditional use permits to the committee level instead of Board of Adjustment, if a town doesn't like the conditional use permit or that is granted here, could they appeal it to the BOA?
Yes, that would be the correct procedure.
So that procedure is kind of already there. So I'm just wondering what everybody else thinks about that.
I guess would that line, I guess, really effectively change anything? Because any appeal goes to the BOA anyway.
What line are you referring to,
I think
Mr. Chair?
I think you're referring to 1531C, right? In the proposed amendment? Or 15531C.
15.530 and then 3,
No, 1C.
1C, variances to the Board of Adjustment. So you're thinking about striking that?
I guess
Or, sorry, I missed.
I think the question is, does having that in there change what the procedure is going to be? Because we're changing, with the zoning change, we're changing the initial review of conditional use permits and variances to the committee.
Correct. And so yes, that would change the procedure, especially for variances too, you know. Conditional uses, a gravel pit, maybe a special home-based business, a sawmill, you know, those are the types of uses that maybe a town board would have concerns about, or would want to take and have some rules and regulations for the traffic on the road or the hours of operation. Variances, you know, and I'm not sure that a lot of town boards are trained to handle variances too, because there's special criteria that you have to evaluate a variance request against. And so that would be a liability concern that I would have on the town board. And that is like, well, we just don't think that you need a house that tall, and they don't use any, you know, justification, unnecessary hardship, physical property limitations, and contrary to public interest, for example. That could be an issue that, you know, that they might not be trained or able to handle as well as the Board of Adjustment.
For recommending, so we're reviewing an amendment right now. So I would recommend we vote on this amendment and then talk about starting an additional amendment to maybe modify some of this language a little bit. Or we can start over with a new amendment where you reword it completely from scratch. Up to. Yep. Oh, yeah. Right. But if the vote, anyway, we got to vote on the amendment first, then we decide what to do after that. If we want to modify this further, we'd have to get out of this amendment thing we're in. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess, Scott, you've been on the town boards that none of the rest of us have, so what do you think about what we've been talking about? You've been quiet.
I can also see the points that you're making with this, that I'm not as overly concerned on the timeline as I am about making sure that we have a due process and that we can ensure that they have the opportunity to have what's necessary to make correct decisions. And if, whatever it's gonna take to do that, and if this basis is what they were thinking, but if we need to modify this a little bit to make it so it gets what it gets to what they're trying to do, but without giving us additional delays or things. Jerry made the point that branching off and doing them at the same time, I think that is a good thing. I think the big thing would be that the sooner they get the paperwork from the staff, the review from the staff to the town level, that's going to expedite how fast the town can react to get the information back for what their review is. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. I'm kind of skirting around it, but yeah, I don't really have a really good answer for how to fix it.
And that would make the cause for both of them received at the same time. If they both received at the same time, then the quickest one that can handle it passes it on to the other. That would expedite it. Probably the only way we can expedite it.
Yeah.
So maybe that kind of language should be in at the same time. So that would be for two-way. That both of them would receive the information at the same time. The county, the township.
So we can do that as an internal policy if you want, or we can take and actually modify the ordinance here. But one of the things that it seems like on my side is that maybe number 2, the procedure, you strike that altogether, and then you make the submittal number 2, and then, but currently the 3B, it says the town may provide those comments on a variance and a conditional use permit application, so that you still are allowing, you're actually still extending their authority to provide comments on a variance, which they hadn't done in the past, and any conditional uses, and that we encourage them to apply. And I think our staff tell the towns and the property owners or the applicants, hey, that whatever the town says is probably going to be taken pretty seriously by the committee or the Board of Adjustment and that on the application. But that might be an option in that. And if you want me to put something in there as far as the notice being provided to each, the town and the county upon application submittal, that's not a problem either. So
I think that would take care of that part of it anyway,
Okay.
the number 2 part quite well. I'm not sure though in 3B if we should leave the word may in there or must. The town must provide rather than may provide, because otherwise we're again hanging on the end of a string, wondering if they're going to get back to us or not. Whereas if they must, then we will. If we don't get it, then we move on. But if we do, then we.
yeah. So it does say at the end of the sentence there, applications at or before the public hearing. And that, so in other words, if the hearing date comes and we didn't have any comments, we could move forward, assuming that they weren't going to provide comments. And I'm not sure that every town wants to provide comments on every use or variance, so.
But the problem is with the word may, there's not a deadline. It may happen, it may not happen, but if you put a deadline in there, then if it doesn't happen by then we can go. This idea of just, well, I might say something. I don't know if that's good for timing. Or what are we going to do? You're going to say, well, we didn't hear from them. Well, usually we do. We didn't hear from them. Do we put it off another month? Do we go ahead without? And then they come back and say, well, we always did it this way before? Or do we put some wording in there that says this is how it's 1, 2, 3, 4 finished?
I think it's tough to obligate the towns to do anything. That's not like a requirement. I don't know that we can actually obligate them to do anything.
Well, that would make it a requirement. That's my point.
But I don't know that we can. Go ahead, Supervisor Shirley.
I don't mind having the may in there because I think that most of our municipalities that are under county zoning are under county zoning because they want us to do it. They don't want to look at this stuff, so the may, I like that. So to get this moving forward, I would like to make an amendment on the amendment.
You're gonna have to wait. We're gonna have to vote on this amendment, and then when it's
Vote on
part
this
of the,
amendment?
we have to vote on this one, and then when it's part of the whole, it would be the
Okay.
ordinance as amended, and then you can amend the ordinance as amended, correct? Yeah. I've been lecturing for that one too many times a couple years ago. Anyway. Ready to vote on this current amendment. I think we all know which at least I know which direction I'm going. Voice vote good for everybody? Yeah. All right. All those in favor of this amendment, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Amendment passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we have an amendment to the ordinance as amended.
Yes, an amendment would be to strike the number 2 procedure. And then I would like to strike out on 3A, the entire sentence that says, if the town fails to provide a recommendation, the public hearing shall occur without town recommendation. We have moved towards the policy of looking for a town recommendation, and now we're saying that we may move forward without it. It's kind of contradictory to what we've been doing. So I'd like to strike that out.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on that amendment? I like it myself.
Can I jump
Yeah.
in? And
Yes,
then,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, if you don't mind. So under 3B, just some sample text. Upon receiving an application, staff shall immediately provide notification to the town to prevent further delay. That's talking about the staff getting that notice out there right away. I don't know if you want to include that as part of this amendment or if that would be a separate amendment. It'd be 3B right now.
I'd agree in including that in this.
That'd be right at the end of the paragraph.
Anyone opposed to that being part of the same? Yeah, amendment, adding one simple sentence. Everyone's clear on what this item is. Any further comment? Go ahead, Supervisor.
Clarification, so this would be number 2. There would,
Yes, this would now be number 2, but before the amendment, it is currently number 3.
Yep.
So once the amendment passes, it'd be viewed as number 2 as amended. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor of this amendment, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. And I think you had 2 other recommended amendments we should talk about.
Yes, one was under section 15.285, and that was, and that for the wedding venue, it was just a row going across. We didn't have any permitted uses in there. Just wanted to strike that wedding venue use because we consider a wedding venue ag tourism now. And then also, we added a line for tourist rooming houses or the Airbnbs in that there. And there is a statute that's called the right to rent law that says that we have to allow a single-family residential unit the right to rent for 180 days per year. And so we would just want to make that on that a land use permit in the Ag 1 and the Ag 2 zoning districts in 15.285, which is the use table.
Anyone, all right? Supervisor,
I'll make a motion to make those 2 changes.
stated by staff. All right, Supervisor Summer, the second. Any discussion on this amendment? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment carries unanimously. Now we're back to the Chapter 15 as amended. Any further amendments, to Chapter 15? Supervisor Shirley.
I would like to go back to, we had changed the ag entertainment from 15 days to 10 days. I would like to take a second little look at that of not reducing that 15 to 10.
Was that an amendment you're proposing?
Yes.
Any seconds?
Pull it up.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. Well, it's in the use table here too. Right here, ag entertainment. Is that where you'd like Supervisor Shirley?
That it?
Yes, that's right.
So what that says right now is in the Ag 1, Ag 2, and the C2 zoning categories, in that ag entertainment business for 10 days or less per year would just be a land use permit. And then if it was more than 10 days, and that it'd be a conditional use permit in those same zoning categories. And the reason for the land use permit, and that is because of the off-street parking and the sanitary requirements to make sure that they're held, and then also to be able to hold them to 10 days, or to know how many days that they're renting, and that's that we have kind of an idea of what their event schedule looks like. So that's the thought process behind having it as a land use permit.
I'll second for the purpose of discussion.
All right, we have a second. Time for discussion. Supervisor Van Sumeren.
I think 10 days is good. I would like to see it even less. And I go back to what we say in our comprehensive plan, where we say that we listen to what the people say, the customers around, or the people who live around these things say, before we as a committee make that decision. And we have a history of not doing that, first of all. Secondly, 10 days is a lot. You know, if you look at 10 weekends, that takes most of the summer. 15 takes all of the summer. And I think if we're concerned about a neighbor to one of these venues, whatever it may be, wedding, winery, whatever, without getting a conditional use permit, we're really kind of torturing the neighbors who have to put up the additional traffic, the additional noise, whatever goes with that. So I think, I guess I would acquiesce to 10, but I don't think we should go back to 15.
Any other comments on this one? Yeah, go ahead.
So currently, we are 10 days if it's greater than 100 people at the event, correct? Okay.
Correct.
All right, I think we'll do a roll call vote on this one. If we're ready, if there's no more discussion.
Like to clarify a
Mm-hmm.
question.
Go ahead.
No, clarify what this is on.
Oh,
Exactly.
this is on.
Is this on a change to this?
Yeah, so the egg entertainment for greater than 100 people during a 24-hour period, it used to just be well, the way it was originally was, or the way it is stated now, it's a land use permit for less than 10 days in a calendar year. The amendment proposes to change that back to 15 in a calendar year. So that's what we're talking about right now. All right, I think we'll take a roll call vote on this amendment. Help me out.
Sean Anderson,
Yes.
Scott Counter,
No.
Carrie Rice,
No.
Ryan Shirley,
Yes.
Jerry Van Someren,
No.
All right, that amendment fails 3-2. Do we have another amendment? Yeah?
I just have a question. On this
question.
land use table, we have the agricultural entertainment, thing we just talked about. We have two separate lines and they seem to be the same thing. I think we were trying to do conditional use for
Yep.
more than,
More than,
oh, I'm sorry, I see it now.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yep. It's just the carrot. That's the only thing different.
It's this way or this.
And half the time I get it wrong.
okay. All right. Any other proposed amendments to Chapter 15 as amended? Seeing none, all ready for a vote? I think I can do a voice vote on this one. Yep. All those in favor of Chapter 15 as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nay. All right, that carries unanimously. We'll see you.
And just so the committee knows in that, we will be going through and accepting all the changes in the document, cleaning up all the formatting and grammar and stuff, making sure that it reads good. And so there'll be a clean copy for the March County Board meeting, so.
Yep, and I want to thank staff for all the time you spent in meetings, and definitely, I'm sure, meetings that we weren't attending and all that stuff to make this a cleaner version and to give good recommendations. And I appreciate the committee members' time and all the extra meetings we took over the last year, for sure. It's been,
It's a big undertaking.
Yes.
It had a lot of time on it, so, yep.
all right. Now we'll move to public hearing number 2, proposed amendments to the St. Croix County Comp Plan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So we talked about this at last month's meeting, and we made the changes that the committee had. We went through the ag census data. Most of the changes that you had suggested were in regards to the coordination and just kind of strengthening up the text a little bit. And so I'm getting there now. And so we had a conversation about whether or not the text should say require coordination or demand coordination. And so we couldn't really find a word halfway in between that and encourage. So we were kind of thinking maybe strongly encourage might be an option. And then we added this text here, including any projects with state or federal funding, and that at the last meeting. So I don't know if that's what the committee was looking at. I did talk to Highway Commissioner Rob Croix, and he didn't have any opposition to the strongly encourage text, so that's kind of it. Otherwise, the other changes are in regards to renewable energy systems and also the 2022 ag census data, so. And the proper 30-day public hearing notice was provided before this public hearing. And so, and the committee packet, and that includes the full red line version of the plan, and then that'll be a clean plan for the county board as well. But all the changes are exactly the same as what the memo has here in the plan.
Any quick questions, or I'll hear if the public has any comment first? Any comment from the public on the comprehensive zone, wait, I'm wording that wrong, on the amendments to the St. Croix County Comp Plan? Any public comments on the comp plan? Public comment on the comp plan going 3 times, and public hearing is closed. Thank you. We'll now move into business item number 2. Resolution to adopt the St. Croix County 2025 to 2045 comp plan amendment. Do we have any questions for staff? No. Go ahead.
As far as the coordination section goes, I personally would like to see that, instead of strongly encourage, I would like to see it say require. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels about that.
What is our enforcement mechanism if we require?
Hasn't there been a federal statute that allows us to do that and would require, yes. I think there's been a federal statute passed in the last 6 months or something that has allowed us to put that kind of language in here. Go ahead.
But wasn't that the wording that Robbie was kind of opposed to, that strongly, require?
Yeah,
Because of the way we get some grants on the highway department and on the
I think-
transportation committee?
Yep. I think Commissioner Croix was just a little bit worried about damaging the relationships in that between the DOT and the Federal Highway Administration with our county highway department and the funding that we get for maintaining our county roads.
Right, and I think that's, we discussed that at the transportation committee too, and that was his reason for not wanting that. Has to be, because that means that they would have to, but we would have to also. And that could change our relationship.
The way I'm reading this, we would only have to if we use federal or state funding for something, which would happen anyway.
Right, which is a grant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, transportation lives on grants.
Mm-hmm.
We really don't want to mess that.
Yeah, go ahead, Shirley.
When I was talking to Robbie, his concern was when we had that, that language in there about and local government. So now that that's gone, it was my understanding that he was okay with it now that we changed that to and county governments instead of and local government. But,
I think the other one's also.
right. But the original text, when we had it, that Robbie was concerned about was when it said county governments and local government, so that the municipalities could require our coordination when we were trying to put a county road in. So I think that was the main concern from there. But the coordination between DOT and the county is already there, so I don't know. We're not really requiring anything that's not already done as far as transportation goes.
Can I entertain a motion on this item? And then we can talk about amending it after the motion. Sure, go ahead, Supervisor Shirley.
I'll make an amendment to replace the strongly encourage with require.
We don't have it on the floor.
Oh,
Actually, yeah.
well, then I'll make a motion to approve the resolution for the adopting the 2025-2045 comp plan.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Supervisor Rice, thank you. And amendment?
Now I will make an amendment to replace on, what page are we on? 184, letter A, the strongly encourage coordination to require coordination. And if there are other places that say strongly encourage, also change that to require.
Is there another place that has similar language that says strongly encourage, Jason? I think there was one more.
I don't believe so. We had a lot of encourages on the utilities.
Yeah, that one we can't, you want that to be strongly encouraged? Yeah, oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, we got another strongly encourage here. And then we got another strongly encourage in the implementation chapter as well. So it'd
the
be three
amendment
places.
to change those three iterations of strongly encourage to require. Okay, do I have a second? I'm gonna second for discussion. And so I've heard the hesitancies. I want to hear from the Scott and Carrie. Calling my shot here. If you have a comment, obviously, but to hear any thoughts or concerns you have on this.
I think our intent is clear. I just, the whole require thing, I mean, if it causes friction for our staff, that's what I would be concerned about. So, maybe the question is more for staff, but.
Generally speaking, too, we're an arm of the state, and the state's an arm of the feds, so it's hard to go the other way around, so. But at least if we are working on grants and stuff, if we were trying to encourage coordination, and that we could use it maybe for a grant application or for working on a project to get what the county desires.
My opinion on this, now that you asked me. But,
Yeah, go ahead.
This 300-page document, not to hurt Jason's feelings, no one's ever going to look at it again after you guys approve it tonight. Whether it says strongly encourage or requires, it doesn't change probably anything. It's a policy document. And you might be able to point to it and coerce the federal government in doing something, maybe. I think that's probably a long shot. But at the end of the day, it's probably not going to make that big of an impact one way or the other.
Sure. Go ahead.
What I've been told from Congressman Tiffany is that the federal government is required to look at our comp plan when there are projects going on in our county. So if they're required to do that, and we're saying in there that we're requiring coordination, then that's the special language in federal documents that moves that forward. If we don't have require in there, then they don't necessarily have to. So that's the reason behind why I want to say require and not strongly encourage, because the more, obviously we want to work with all of our state and federal on all of our projects that have them involved, but we want a seat at the table whenever we can possibly have it, and if this guarantees that we will, then I'd rather go down that road.
I mean, yeah, I kind of agree. Even if they, I guess, breeze by it, then it won't hurt anything. And if they take it seriously, then this is the I guess the trigger phrase, lack of a better term. Go ahead.
I mean, at the end of the day, it would be a policy decision by the county if, say, somebody didn't coordinate with us. It would be for Corp Council to do something about it, and that's a decision for a later date. I mean, it's not saying that we're requiring it and we'll sue you if we don't. We're saying we're going to require it. So I don't think we're saying that there's additional steps made if they don't follow our rules.
Go ahead.
I kind of go along with what Ken said. I just think that our chances of telling the federal government something and them really listening to it or reading our comp plan, even though they're supposed to, required to, they could easily skip over that and say, nah, that's not a big deal. And then maybe we're making too big of a deal of it. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion on the amendment? No? Oh, we Supervisor Counters, all right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not falling asleep. I guess the concern I have with this, again, is the same. I really would be reluctant to do something where staff is not completely comfortable. And if they're saying something that they have some concerns, we are so reliant on these funds and how we're perceived when people read our documents can make a difference in how much coordination we're gonna get with them to begin with. So if we come in and we're saying we're very, very strong in our, how we've written things and how they see us, the chances are that, versus doing it in a softer way, the chances are more likely that they're gonna say, well, this one's too many obstacles, let's go to County B or County C. They need the money too, and this just makes it more difficult for us, so let's step back. I'm not saying that that's necessarily what's gonna happen, but I'd hate to put St. Croix in the corner where we're overlooked because of something, how our document was read. So I'm a little concerned about that change.
Any further discussion? No? I think we'll do a roll call vote on this one as well.
Could you repeat the motion?
Yeah, the motion is to change the 3 iterances of strongly encourage related to intergovernmental cooperation to read require instead. All right, roll call vote. Julie?
Scott Counter, Carrie Rice,
No.
Ryan Shirley,
Yes.
Jerry Van Someren,
No.
Sean Anderson.
Yes. Fails 3-2. All right. Back to the original comp plan. Any other amendments to the comp plan? All right. That being said, I think we're ready for a vote. I think we'll probably do this one as a voice vote. All those in favor of the comp plan, of amending the comp plan as stated, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll go on to public hearing number 3. Yeah.
There's also an ordinance on the comp plan. That's a business item number 3. It just has to be approved in 2 different formats because of, I don't know, silly state laws and stuff.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. I guess we'll go to business item 3, ordinance to adopt the St. Croix County 2025-2045 comp plan amendment. Do I have a motion? Supervisor Rice?
Move to approve the ordinance to adopt St. Croix County 2045 Comprehensive Plan Amendment.
Do I have a second? Supervisor Counter? Any discussion? All those, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? That also carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move on to public hearing number 3, resolution to amend the master plan for Eckert Blufflands Park.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So the next public hearing here is an amendment to the 2022 Eckert Blufflands Master Plan. And the committee has seen this plan several times. Staff have also presented this new concept plan to the town of St. Joseph and the town of Hudson. And we have also been working with the DOT on the new accesses. The proper hearing notice was provided before the hearing tonight. We also held 2 public input sessions. One was December 17th. And before that, December 17th, we took and provided a written notice to all property owners within 300 feet of the Eckert property. So the whole property, there's about 45 property owners that got direct notice of that. And then on Tuesday night, February 18th here, so 2 nights ago, we held one here again, and we had about 10 attendees in that showed up for that open house. We didn't have any public comments submitted writing during that public house. And so we did have some comments about a fence and that potentially. And so staff is going to dig into that a little deeper in that, because it sounds like maybe our department removed it after the property was surveyed and the fence was on the county's property. But in general, I'll pull up the master plan here. In the PowerPoint overview, I went through this last month as well, so I'm going to go pretty fast. But mainly the master plan is changing, and that are proposed to change, and that to do more passive trail usage, not the camper cabins and the yurts and the walking campsites and that like the original plan. The original cost in that was, about $14.8, $15 million due to inflation since 2022. And that we were figuring that that could be anywhere from 18 to 20 million. And that by the time the park is actually developed out. The amended master plan, and that does include a new entrance onto Highway 35. Before it was building a new entrance on the north end of the property. And the new plan, and that moves that entrance to the south end of the property. Several reasons for that change were, and that the previous amended plan had all of the park or the property owners within the park using the entrance and that of the park to get to their property. So anytime their friends or their deliveries and that would be coming, they would have to drive through the park entrance. There was also a need to take and stage cars. And so the park entrance building got moved down quite a ways and that through the trees. There was a lot more road construction in that with that original plan, a lot more trees to be removed. And then also, since that master plan was done, the original phase 1 of the Highway 35 bike and ped trail was designed, which had a crossing at the south access point of Old 35. And so if we would have stayed with the original master plan, it had all the bike traffic crossing at the south end of Old 35, going through the park and then crossing again at the north end of Old 35. And by taking and having that south access, and that then anybody that's crossing Highway 35 right there would only be the park users, or that are people going to the park, or the property owners that live on Old 35 or within the park. The normal, I'll call it through traffic, and that on the Highway 35 bike and ped plan would just keep on the east side of Highway 35 and continue north or south, however they're going. Also, the parking lot area, and that was moved to the south, but yet still kept, as far east as possible in that proposed field area to try to reduce the impact of noise on the surrounding property owners, but also reduce the amount of trees and vegetation that had to be removed close to the St. Croix River and the associated bluffs. So I do have some handouts in that we've been providing at the Eckerd Blufflands open house, but I'll zoom in here just for the file. So, sorry for the blurriness, but this yellow line here is the current phase 1 of the Highway 35 bike and ped trail coming up where it crosses. And that the first phase of the park development would include improving this access here. And Robbie with our highway department has been in communication with the DOT about what that would actually be. It has not been designed yet, but they did fly this old Highway 35 road in the last week here to do topo on it to start the design. Then that old Highway 35 roadbed would be built up to town of Hudson specs, and that which is up to this point here. Then anything above that point is in the town of St. Joe, so that a portion of the road and cul-de-sac would be built up to the town of St. Joe specs. The cul-de-sac at River Heights Trail right here would then, and that taken allow park users to come in on the existing private road. We would improve the width of that road so it could handle two-way traffic. And then there would be a fair amount of signage right here, and that to stop park users from using the existing road that the property owners back here use, and that to access the park. And you'll notice on this proposed plan, there's no parking lots off from this road like there was in the past. And that is, again, that we don't have any park users coming down here and trying to access it. Then that we're proposing a gate system here, which we had some positive comments through the open house about, because people were concerned if staff are gone and there's not a gate here of some sort, is this going to be a new party grounds, back here? And so that gate would be programmable, and that so that after 10 o'clock, it won't let anybody into the park. Then, and that the road here that is proposed and the parking lot area, the idea was to kind of get all the heavy dirt moving done in one shot so that all the proper stormwater and erosion control can be done. So there's a couple low spots here. This isn't by any means engineered, of course, but those are just trying to, show that there would be some capture of the runoff. And then this first phase, and that would include dropping gravel on this first part of the Blue Trail here, which comes down right here. And there would actually be like a swing bridge that would be here, and then another one potentially here, kind of to get our feet wet with what a swing bridge would be and what that construction would look like on a couple smaller ravines. Before, this is some really steep terrain down here in the bottom of the park. I'm not even sure if that's really obtainable in that, but that's what the original master plan had. Also, the existing Eckert cabin here, and that would be more of an informational center in that for a future use, and potentially have some stairs or hiking and that going down to the water. Both of these say potential stairs down to the waterway, because one of the concerns that we've got from staff's side of it is if we promote access down to the river, and we're talking about a 130-foot bluff probably, and that, how do we get EMS vehicles, even a UTV down there, in case somebody has problems getting back out of there? And so that's why it says potential, and that is if we can figure out a way, maybe that can be done in the future and that, but right now, that's our concern. But there is a really nice spot here, kind of on a point that overlooks the bluff and the new Highway 3664 bridge, which is what, and that part of this park was funded with, was those bridge funds. And there could be a nice, 16 by 20, a small pavilion, but that would still meet all the bluff line setbacks and stuff and the zoning rules. So that's another thing that this plan does and would be, constructed meeting all of the zoning regulations of the St. Croix Riverway. So that kind of summarizes it. Last Thursday night, I was out to the town of St. Joseph, and they made a motion on the northern portion here of Old 35. They would like to see the north end here have some guardrail put up, the remaining portion of the road and that to be seeded, and then for this whole portion of the road to be vacated, and that so that there is no ownership past the cul-de-sac here. And that the property owner here to the north, and that we have had conversations with them, they're in the audience tonight, but they are accepting in that the longer driveway, so that they don't have public traffic coming halfway up to their house, turning around because they missed the park entrance, and that just for more privacy. So, but basically everything in the plan has stayed the same since last month. The original master plan had almost 800 vehicle trips per day, all the camper cabins, all the higher density uses, and that the proposed plan, and that has about an 80 stall parking lot area and roughly about 208 trips per day max. And of course, that would be during peak season and peak hours. And that in the off season is going to be much less than that, fall, winter, early spring. When the county purchased that property, it was rural residential. And at that time, and that the amount of dwellings that could have been built on the property, and if you figured them at 10 vehicle trips per day, would have been between 230 and 260 daily vehicle trips, and that would have been year-round, of course, for that 23 to 26 dwellings. So the proposed use is less impact than if it was to be platted out into single-family homes. I went over a little bit before about the estimated cost of that original master plan being about 15 million to 20 million. The proposed new updated cost, because of its limited development in nature, is 3.6 million. And that does include a playground, it includes some money in that for some kind of a sports field. Pickleball is what we're talking. We're not talking a baseball field or a football field. And then a maintenance facility and that for that trail, and then also the Highway 35 bike and ped trail. So that's kind of, we're still hoping in that part of that cost that we're able to apply for grants in that to help offset the county's share of that. If this phase 1 goes through 2026, we would be starting to apply for grants. So here's the meeting dates and that we've had. And if the Community Development Committee approves of it tonight, it would be requiring approval of the county board on March 4th. So with that, is there any questions?
Go ahead. Yeah, let's do the public hearing real quick.
Okay.
We'll take questions during the business item. Do you have any public comment on the, yes, now would be the time. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. My name is Ann Deming. I live at 1077 Old Highway 35. We strongly object to the entrance being moved to the south side. We were at the December meeting, we went to the January meeting, we were at last week's Township of St. Joseph meeting, and have in writing written our concerns and not received answers back from the county. So I'm going to be very precise about our concerns. We strongly object to the proposed entrance. My husband and I are residents directly impacted by this recent proposed change to the park. But I think every single resident on Old Highway 35 is as well. The construction of a new paved road and gates at the doorstep will significantly impact the way that we experience our home. Altering access to the park with a new paved road is not a necessary step and should not be considered an inevitable outcome. These changes have a lasting impact on the property value, and the prior park plan, in contrast, did not create these kind of disruptions and maintained the balance between park development and residents' enjoyment of the space. This proposal is incompatible with the rural residential zoning. Our property is zoned as agricultural and rural. This proposed relocation of the park's entrance from the north to the south side is basically in front of our residents and threatens everything about it by introducing high-traffic public use into low-density residential areas. And the comprehensive plan for the park that was originally stated said that you were going to enhance and maintain the rural character of the town. You were going to encourage the preservation of large agricultural tracts. You were going to encourage and enhance preservation of open spaces and work with agencies, adjacent jurisdictions, the county and state, to improve ways to improve open spaces. If you allow this south entrance, it undermines every single one of those planning objectives and alters land use patterns and increases traffic and activity that's incompatible with the surroundings. And there is absolutely, it was raised earlier on a different topic, there is absolutely a lack of meaningful public engagement. As I mentioned, we attended every single one of those meetings. And in the January meeting, we submitted in writing things that were used in the meeting minutes. We've not received any comment back about these concerns. No mediation, no what about ABC, nothing else has been considered. The Eckert Blufflands Park Master Plan emphasized the importance of public engagement, and the county's efforts to involve effective residents has been inadequate. The only outreach has been a single open house, which didn't result in follow-up as stated. The entrance relocation will drastically alter our use and our enjoyment of our property that we have lived in for 20 years. This entrance and cul-de-sac is placed immediately in front of our home, and funneling traffic increases just daily into what should be a low residential density area. At a minimum, I'm asking you to pause, to allow a meaningful engagement, and to find a solution that aligns with some long-range planning goals. And I would also challenge several of the previous comments as inaccurate. Number one, it was mentioned that my neighbor to the north didn't want traffic and backup and people, in their driveway. That problem hasn't been solved. It's just been pushed down to our driveway, to the front of our road. There was also a mention about that there has been no traffic study. That's the other piece here. Park visitors behave very differently than residents. Residents have garages, and we know where we're going, and we're not confused. We're not going to stop. You're basically turning our home into a welcome desk for visitors to the park. And that north entrance, by the way, the original plan was going through an existing utility corridor that has invasive species. The one being suggested now goes through oaks, which offer better biodiversity. I did raise some of these concerns at the township meeting. I also think that someone entering a park doesn't necessarily dictate where they're going to park. So an entrance and a parking are two different things. We have raised these concerns, and there's 170 acres as part of this park. I think there is a different option that could be proposed that doesn't destroy our way of life on Old Highway 35. Thank you for listening to my comments and concerns.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Yes, step right up.
Thank you for hearing me. I'm Teresa Johnson, the chair for the town of St. Joseph. And I just touched that, so obviously it's not where it needs to be. The town of St. Joseph was well aware of the north entrance that was originally proposed, because that was the entrance that St. Croix County insisted that C.A. Richards put in when he wanted to develop that property. So the traffic would never have gone down Old Highway 35. It would have gone across it to the new 35. And that is what St. Croix County at the time, when he was trying to develop that property, insisted be done. CA walked away from that for whatever reason. His developer decided not to. And then the land was purchased by St. Croix County. Town of St. Joseph found out about this alignment at the meeting that you had around the 1st of October. I wrote an email to Jason and to Ken Witt and to Bob Long stating that the town board was told at that time that the town was in support of this new alignment, and we had never seen it. It had never come before us. So that's where I got involved in this again, because I had been involved in it in the past, requesting a meeting between the town of Hudson, the town of St. Joe, St. Croix County, and State Highway to figure out how this is going to work on this particular roadway and how it enters onto 35. Both ends are bad. I'll speak for the town of Hudson, but they're here to speak themselves. My end is horrific. Theirs is not great. So there's no good entrance down that road. That's why the original north entrance that was going to go straight across to Highway 35 was really the greatest choice and would make the least impact on everyone. I know dollars push these decisions. I get that. I sit where you sit, only in a lesser capability. The motion that was made by the board at last week's meeting was made because we wanted the county to know that we need to discontinue that north end of that road, and in doing so, we expect to get your surveying from you to do that instead of us paying secondary surveyors to do it. And we're concerned that once that's restored, there's going to be a concern that people are still going to try to enter it from the north and go flying off the embankment, so that's why we asked for the guardrail. We also stated that we have to have this road built to our standards on our end of it. No different than when Federal Highway came in to build that Highway 64 bridge. All those roads in the town of St. Joseph were built to our standards. We have our own standards for that, and we require that you build them to that. So those couple of things I wanted you to be aware, because we kind of came in this late, so to speak, and I feel like the residents are feeling that they're not being heard, and that came out at our meeting last week also, and that maybe there needs to be some more time on this and some more revisions to this. I agree with the fact that not having camper cabins and yurts and all this is a good thing. I think this will be fantastic. But one of the things that was brought up at a meeting, I think in January, was that we don't see any policy decisions here on how first responders and the sheriff is going to be able to access this park. And what will happen? I'm fully well aware what happens in that state park and at the one in St. Joe that you own, Homestead. I'm fully well aware what it takes to get into those parks and save people's lives, because it's my first responders in the town of St. Joseph that have to be out there to do that. It's going to be the same thing here, and I don't see any real plan in any discussion that has taken place with my fire chief and first responder chief on this. So before you're making a decision on this plan, some of those discussions have to take place with your governmental entities that are going to have to service this. We have to service this road, and we have to service you for fire and rescue. And I would like to be able to sit down with my fire and first responder chief and the county sheriff and find out how everyone feels about this plan that you're trying to put in place. I just don't think there's been enough time on this to really consider where you're going with this and what's going to happen with it. So, you know, I'm well aware that this is something you're excited to get done and move forward and get going. I understand that. I'd like it to be the best that it can be. And I'm not sure this is the best, or if this is just being driven by money, because coming in from the south will be cheaper than going across to Highway 35. I think in the end, you're going to find out that that's not going to be much more expensive than what you're trying to do here. But I really think it's something that has to have some more thought to it. And I think tonight is a little premature to push that off to the county board. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth. But the town board of the town of St. Joseph did not approve this plan. They simply put forward their requirements for this road and the discontinuance of Old 35 if it comes to that. So I'm just making you aware of that. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's step right up.
Tim Foster, Town of Hudson Chair. Jason did come out to the Town of Hudson. I wasn't involved in the early first phase of when Ellen came out and talked about it. I didn't realize the road was originally going to go to the north out onto 35. I always assumed that it was going to come out onto Old Highway 35. And at that time, even when Ellen was there, I said, you got to make sure you bring that up to town standards. And you're all aware of what happened with the county standards. We always used the county standards for our roads. And when the lawsuit went through from Wood County, that caused us all in our towns to have to write our own standards because the county couldn't determine how our roads were built. And that's what causes that problem of it has to be built to our standards. It's pretty much the same as the county standard used to be, but it is. One of the big concerns is that road is Old Highway 35. There's concrete someplace underneath there. There's no ditches in that thing. There's no width in it. If you're going to have to do borings, you got to come up with a way to put ditches in there. And where's the bike path going to be? And when Greg Haig left the county as your engineer, that left Robbie as the only engineer besides being your highway county commissioner. I do not see how you can possibly build that road in 2025. I just don't, because I haven't seen anything yet about where the bike trails, whether they're going to do borings, all of that stuff has to be accomplished before you can move forward. And because I got one road in the town of Hudson I want to have redesigned, and they're telling me I can't do it this year because of all the roads the county is doing with your normal highway commissioner doing that as a design engineer. So I don't know how you think you're going to do this one this year, but it's got to be done right when we do it. So please take that into consideration as you move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Step right up.
Hello, my name is Bill Lindau. I am let's see. Oh boy, there we go. I am the owner of this property here. And it is my fence that was removed. I have it shown in a survey from 1962 on the property line. Now that I don't know how accurate that survey was, and things change. It's also an easement for the power lines, and my fence was on the north side of that easement, and the easement was primarily on my property. Now, I, not complaining about that, but I do want to know what is going to keep people from coming on my property now that that fence is gone. Also, during our meeting, who was the other gentleman that was with us? Not you, not you? JR. JR told me verbally that the maintenance building that is shown on this drawing would be 300 feet clear from my property line. It's not shown 300 feet clear on this, so I'd like that amended to show that the maintenance building is going to be 300 feet from my property line. Road improvements, they don't affect me. I think that staying on the center of the road, bringing it up to town spec is a good thing. I do have the same concerns that they do. I don't want my neighbors to be unhappy. There was a bike trail put in on the west side of 35 and east side of 35 that crosses there. That's going to affect that road and change the grades of that road. It's a very, very difficult intersection at that location, and putting in that bike trail with the turning lanes and things that are going to be required there is going to make that quite a bit wider, which that steep slope coming off there, I have not seen the survey yet. They're out surveying it. That's going to be a very difficult road to construct coming down that steep bank and then around the corner. But I think it can be done. Also, that bike trail I will not let my children ride on that bike trail because there's some areas there that are really close to the road, and it slopes about a 45-degree angle right to the road. And that is going to be a major issue if some little kid takes her bike, hits that slope, and goes right out in the middle of 35. There's no way they could stop if they weren't a good bike rider. Even a good bike rider, if they hit that slope, not knowing it, maybe at night, maybe looking at a tree, they'll hit that slope and they're going to send themselves right out into 35. And there's nothing stopping them. So my biggest thing is the amendment of that to show that building 300 feet clear from my property, as JR said in that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other public comment?
Can I come one more time?
It's brief.
They're laughing in the back. I'll be very brief. There was also a question about these bike lanes that you're going to put on this old Highway 35. Old Highway 35 has 100-foot right-of-way. It has 33 feet wide right-of-way. How's that going to work? And until that survey and those bike plans for the road and the bike lanes are submitted, what impacts are you making on those residents if you have to take their land to get this in there? And I question that because that hasn't been done yet. You still don't know what that's going to look like. And so if you approve this plan and can't carry it out, then what? Then you're back at the drawing board. And I guess I would like to just not approve this tonight and go back and make sure you got all your ducks in a row on this one. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other public comment? Any public comment on the park plan? And we'll ask one more time, any other park plan public comment? All right, public comment is closed on the park plan. We go to business item 4, a resolution approving Eckert Blufflands Park Master Plan Amendment. What questions, comments, anything do we have from the committee? No, not at the committee level. We would have had that problem all night if that were the case. Go ahead.
And this may be a question for really Jason or other staff. We've heard some concerns about both the north and the south entrance. And we we came to a logical conclusion in my time on the board to the south entrance being the more logical one to look at. At what point, I'm thinking in the layering of this project management, there will be things I don't doubt that Robbie and his team will discover as this goes forward. You know, give me an idea of what the sequence of discovery is. We're surveying and then what the next steps are.
Correct. And that, so, like I said, last week, and that old Highway 35 was flowing for topo and that, so we got all the grades and stuff figured out. Our county surveyor is mapping out the right-of-way of Old 35, so we know exactly what we've got. So far in that, our preliminary digging has shown that we've probably got enough right-of-way up until the cul-de-sac at least. And then there would be documents that would need to be done to discontinue is the proper word in that, but everybody knows it as vacate that north portion of Old 35. And then there would also need to be a public dedication because we don't plan on taking any property from the property owners in between the 235s over here, and that for any of the cul-de-sac or any of the width, and that the public dedication would be from the county for the extra width of the cul-de-sac here to the town, and that is part of the town road. And so that document would also have to be done. And then once all of this is done, then the north end would be shut down and we would work with the DOT to make sure that we shut down that access point according to how they want to do it. And same thing down here. So there's a lot of, state municipalities and that we need to work with and coordinate here. Then with also the vacancy of the county highway engineer, talking with Robbie, that we want to do this right and that was the whole reason. Really, the county could have looked at it and said, well, we really don't need to build up Old 35. It's a town road right now. And that if somebody else would have bought the property, they could have had similar type of use and maybe not have had to improve it. However, I think the county has seen all along and that both of these access points are dangerous and that they wanted to make sure that safety was the number one thing that was addressed with the development of this park plan. And so that's what phase one is really. And it's to get this access improved. Now all these houses and that will have a blacktop road to be served by. The comments that are not here tonight was from the property owners and that back in here. They were very pleased about not having to go through the park entrance. They were very pleased about having paved road and that to access their property and not having to go down Old 35. One of them actually said it gets pretty slimy, I guess, at times. And so that's kind of the process that we need to go through. So once we have an engineer on staff, and that it would be to work on the access point here, actually getting the road designed, cul-de-sac designed, working with the town of St. Joe and that to dedicate and to vacate this northern chunk. And so, yeah, reality in that we're looking at, if it was a fast track, talking with Robbie, and that maybe fall, and that in between their main road building season and when the snow flies would be kind of when. And then, and that it'd probably be done in a couple of different phases. And that like pavement in 2026 or something like that after it has a chance to settle over the winter. We also have to get DNR permits because we'll be disturbing more than an acre. And so once we have the design done by the engineer, we're going to have a little bit of a time delay there to get our permits in line.
Additional questions. Could you point out on the map the maintenance building? It is blurry.
Yeah, so the maintenance, so the original master plan had a sledding hill right here. And they, in the original master plan, were gonna remove the portion of the private drive going out here. After doing some deed work and that the private road was actually surveyed back in the 70s, and that's a 33-foot easement in that 1970 easement to access these properties back here. And so that is another one of the reasons in that. I don't think that the cost was necessarily the reason for moving this access to the south at all. It was the access to the adjoining properties within the park, the Highway 35 bike and ped trail, this existing easement needing to be there, and just how do you make all of that work and still have a park? And so, but that maintenance building, I don't know what conversation that was about 300 feet, but 300 feet, we'd be way up in here in that. And the idea behind having that maintenance building in an office, so if you go through the plan, it's like a 40 by 60 with like a 30 by 30 office slash or break room, conference room, so off to the side. And one of the reasons for siting that building here, we would have, pretty adequate screening, but it would also be able to kind of watch over this natural Y in the road between the private users and the park users. And that's why the gate was right here, is because that road literally almost makes a 90-degree corner when you get into that point. And there's a natural kind of shelf that goes in here where this existing road is, because the old farm and the old barn, there's remnants of some foundations and stuff, was about right in this area on that property. And so that was the thought process with this layout and why the maintenance building was here. But there still would be, screening along this property line. We're not opposed to that either, so.
Okay, and another follow-up question. I recall from one of our discussions, you talked about having some signage. So as people enter the park, they would know there are private areas, but that there would be some kind of signage that would direct them to the park entrance.
Correct. So our thought process is, and I'm going to start out at the cul-de-sac there, is we would narrow up the existing Highway 35 trail bed and that for the Ranellas and that live up here, and I maybe pronounced that wrong. But so that would try to indicate that it is a private driveway going north, and we would have to sign that at least for a few years, on that private drive, not a park entrance, do not enter, that kind of stuff. And then when it gets in here to the main Y, we would have similar signage going down to the south on the existing private road, and that private drive, private access, no park parking, no park access. And then we would have probably our park sign here to welcome people to come through. And then there is a small turnaround right there, in case for some reason they decide that they made a wrong turn, so that we're not directing people down the private road. So this little tiny T here, that is like a hammerhead turnaround, so that people can turn around and go back out. But hopefully the cul-de-sac here will definitely have signage for the park entrance too. And by having this at this spot, people are going to be slowing down or almost stopping, and that before they make the turn into the park, versus if this cul-de-sac was pushed farther north, and that somebody that's not familiar with the area, it could be easier for them to bypass or just drive down and see what's at the end because they're curious, or maybe they've got an old mattress that they want to drop off and some tires, so, or maybe have a party, I don't know, but so that was kind of the reason in that for that cul-de-sac being located where the park entrance cut off. And so that's kind of how we were thinking that we would address some of the widths and that and the private access features.
Go ahead.
Jason, can you tell me where on that map the town break is between Hudson and St. Joe?
Yeah, it's right here by
Right
the
there.
maintenance building. So it's right at that 40 line, right there coming across.
So then I have a question. In the earlier, and I don't recall, I probably should. Earlier, what was the way that entrance was going to be gained by the park? It sounds like it was coming straight off of 35. Do you know where that was going to be? Because it sounds like old 35. I know the DOT doesn't like the north entrance of old 35.
Correct. So that
because of the way-
entrance was going to come in about right where my mouse arrow is here. It was going to come in here, well, like so, almost follow this red trail kind of down. The entrance building was going to be right in here. And then there was going to be a road that cut up through the pines here. And then there was going to be a parking lot right here, which when you actually walk that, there's probably 10 feet of elevation change where the parking lot was. It actually drops off right there. And then all the users, so there's 6 or 7 different property users back in here, would have to drive through the park entrance and come back through. Then as far as the bike and ped traffic and that from the Highway 35 trail, they would have to cross here because that portion and that wasn't in the original master plan as being constructed. And then they would come through the park, and then there was a white trail that was coming back out here, crossing Highway 35 again, and then going up the east side.
So that would certainly justify our thinking on the south entrance instead of the north. I mean, everything seems to work out better that way.
Yeah, and so I was out to the town of St. Joe in March and November, and then in February here last week. And so there's been concerns expressed about this crossing, on the south end, and about whether or not you can do a tunnel or even an overpass of some sort. And so what our thoughts were, and that was to try to minimize the safety risk here, and that is, again, to take and allow this through bike and ped traffic to keep on going, and then it's only park users that are coming to the park by bike or walking, and then the people that live back in within this area that would actually be crossing there. So versus everybody, and the loop trail, and that if that Highway 35 trail gets any kind of usage that like that does, I mean, it can be 1,000 people a day or so it's quite a bit.
Yeah, go ahead. We've worked on this a lot since, Jason, you've come to the county, and I think this plan is so much better than the original one was, especially for the property owners on the west side with the access point there. That was a really big concern of mine with the original plan, with how they were gonna get to their property coming through the park. It was a really bad plan. I did have a question. I think it's the next slide maybe is the cost breakdown, or is the one before? One thing that we don't have, I didn't see on there, was the existing cabin that's there. That's not part of this plan to do any work on that existing cabin? So I didn't see a line item in there for doing any work with it.
Correct. Yeah, I don't see it in there either. I will tell you in that our park staff this last summer did some ordinary maintenance and repair, did some siding work, put on new top deck boards and that, but the joists of the deck were good. And then they, stay in the outside of it. It's in pretty good shape, and that it does have some electrical issues right now. It's got a sand point well, and it's got the old, I'll call them screw-in fuses, and that for the main panel. And that main panel, and that it's been hot. It needs to be replaced. But that is more of what we want for the informational center. Do we want to leave it as more of a historic building, or do we want to make the improvements in that to be more modern? And that, for those of you that haven't been there, it's like an octagon shape. It's got an open vaulted ceiling, and that's got some big beams. The main feature in the house, I would say, would be the fireplace in the middle. It's an old wood-burning fireplace, very cool. And then it's got, the majority of glass on the water side of the dwelling. Very small little kitchen, very small little bathroom. So.
Go ahead.
I'm going to go back to my first question, to understanding kind of the phasing out of the project here. We will run into things that we don't anticipate, which is a given in any large project. At some point in this whole thing, if we fail to go forward and pass this, are we unable to start any discovery, any of the initial work? Would that come to a halt, which would probably push costs up?
Well, I mean, that's a challenge for staff because the county board did approve the KIP, funding for 1.5 million to start the phase. And we would rather not fly from the seat of our pants. We'd like to take and make sure that we're spending that money how you'd want to spend that money on this park development. And so, but we might not have a lot of answers in that, and we've been open to continuing meetings in that with, and that the towns, and that to keep them updated on what those road construction standards look like and everything. I will address in that the EMS concern. So we plan on having more trails out here than just these, but this blue trail here, especially this first top part and the red trail, those ones we've been kind of calling our corridor trails, and that would be 8 to 10 feet wide. When it's first built, you could probably get an ambulance down them, but those are the main, EMS access routes to get close. And then if we've got other smaller trails, in between these, and that at least you'd be getting close with a UTV, and that if it was, overgrown in the future a little bit. So that was kind of the thought process behind having a couple bigger trails and then doing a bunch of smaller spider trails off from that.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I guess the other comment that I would say is that after reworking this plan, the point of tonight, from what I understand, is to approve the master plan. There's a lot to figure out from here on out. I think this is the start of the revised plan. So I think a lot of our comments tonight were that we haven't figured out this and we haven't figured out that. And I think that that's for a reason, because we haven't approved this master plan in order to take those steps next.
Any other comments? Go ahead. Where's Connor?
I'm agreeing with you. We've been working on this a long time. It's frustrating that that there's this many problems with it at this point in the game. But I have a question I have for you. Have we looked at any other derivatives other than the north or south access? Is there any ways to purchase right away from some of the existing property owners to go straight across versus from like where the cul-de-sac is going straight across back to 35, north or south of that delineation where it wouldn't impact a homeowner, but yet have short access, and then just completely abandon the road.
So that was one of the concerns and that the property owner here had with the original master plan is because, there's at least 15 feet of elevation change between old 35 and new 35 up here. And so by the time you get your side slopes on that much change, and that water was basically in their yard or on their property. And then, so here, there's actually more of a hill. But now you're putting the traffic, and a new road and that right in between the two homes. And then they would still have old 35, or there would still have to be something to do there. And then how do you take and make that intersection, if you will, between, and that connection from new Highway 35? I mean, is that an overpass over old 35 to get in there? So it gets to be complicated and unknown again.
Go ahead, Supervisor Zimmer.
I think too, Jason, you got a good point there that we're using existing infrastructure that's been there for a long time. That probably is still a state road. That was old Highway 35, so that was a state road. So do we have to get an okay from the state to use that, or is that?
No, it was
granted to-
in
because
that
it is
release
state
to
road?
the towns. Yep.
So really, at one time, the people who lived in that, what now is a little sliver of land, were seeing these car lights in the windows at all times. I mean, because old 35 ran just inside of that. I think that, now that's going to be an improved road, and it's going to be, the entrance will be on the safe side, on the south side instead of the north side. And again, we can come up with a lot of other plans, but we have $1.5 million. We don't have $7.5 million. We've got a lot out of it. So I think we also have to look at keeping the price down, which we're doing. This is a good plan, a good start. Is this the last word? No, I'm certain there's more things, as Carrie said, that we will run into. I mean, you do when you wash your car, even at the Quick Trip, there's more things. But yeah, I think this is a good start, a good plan. I don't know how we would come up with a better plan. Thank you.
Anyone want to make a motion?
I will.
Go ahead.
I resolve that we approve the Eckerd Blufflands Park Master Plan Amendment. Oh, wait a minute, I'm pulling up the wrong one. Is that correct? Amendment, okay, yep.
Do you have a second? Do you have a second?
I'll second it, but are we still in we're past the public hearing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's, I just want to verify.
Yep. Nope. Good question. Any further discussion on this? No. Appreciate everyone coming and for the look forward to continued discussion around specific logistics, assuming this passes. But I understand there's still some engineering work to be done, but this is kind of where we got to start. I think we're ready for a vote. Any reason we don't do a voice vote on this one? Nope. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you.
And staff will continue to take and work with the towns of Hudson and the town of St. Joe and that on the development of the road. So.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, Supervisor County wanted to comment.
As they do the development of this and with all the neighbors, we want to act as good neighbors with everybody with this project. So please stay with us and be involved and we can look at things, whether it's screening issues or whatever, but let's work together to come up with things that are going to make it so that this has the best impact for the county, for everybody.
Right. We'll now move to business item number 5, consideration of the UW Extension work plan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to open this up, and then I'm going to turn it over to Carrie Weiss, the UW Extension Director here. But we met yesterday, actually, and that to talk about some more measurables that Carrie had. And so in the packet, in order to get it out on time, and that you had a work plan, but Carrie also provided updated work plan that's just got a little bit more measurables to it. And so the goals are the same, but for example, it's got a measurable here. So, and with that, I'll turn it over to Carrie Weiss.
Thank you and good evening. I'll try to be brief, but yet also give you some good narrative here to outline what we're attempting to do and obviously field questions. I do think, though, I have a couple of updates that are just really pertinent, and I wanted to jump to those if I could. First and foremost, if you skip ahead in your packet to our crops and soils educator, that's the last page. Becky Brathel, as noted here, has resigned. Her last date in office will be March 20th, 2025. And so that would leave us with a gap of a 0.25 in this position. I did include in the work plan the one event that she still wants to be participating in, which is the workshop on the 19th, which is why then she's not resigning until the 20th. I bring this to your attention, obviously because the committee will have to make a decision about this. The committee will have to make a decision about this. And then I also, and I did not share this in the packet information, but I did send a letter to leadership and to the chair. I brought copies of it, but I can overview it as well. Should I hand it out? Essentially, the letter just basically comes from our dean as a result of the federal funding stipulations that have come down and have impacted UW. We are currently on what he's referring to as a pause, not a freeze, but in an effort to sort of best plan for what might come and what we already are dealing with. This will have some implications on, as well, this crops and soils educator position. Questions, though, about that?
So can you explain that a bit farther? What kind of implications will it have, Carrie?
At current, the university obviously has received a reduction in federal grant funding in the form of primarily medical research, which is a big piece for the university, to the tune of almost $20 million a week that's coming in. And so we don't necessarily, at Extension, receive that funding. We do rely on the university. And so understanding that there might be more that come forward in the future, we're just trying to be as most planned as possible. And so we're pausing. And so I don't know that even if I were able to get approval from the committee, if I would be able to refill this position.
Could you scroll down the work plan to show that position?
I'm sorry.
Did you want to see Supervisor Van Summer and what it impacts on our programming? Okay, yep, it'd be here then.
And so for this, I did only include the one event that she said that she would still honor, but I removed all of the others. And so if we were to move forward, I would reinstate those back on the work plan.
So where does that leave us, Carrie? So we're paying you. We're paying you to do this, and if you don't do this, do we not pay you, or where are we at?
With this contract, you're saying specifically?
Yes. So do we pay and then you work, or do you work and then we pay?
You only pay for a prorated amount. We will return any money, obviously, and then you will not be. We invoice twice a year, and so we'll just include this as a reduction.
Because that's my question. If Becky is no longer in the picture, then we wouldn't be paying for that position.
Correct.
Until it's rehired.
Correct.
So we could come out at the end of the year with, I mean, I could call it a rebate, but without spending all of the money.
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
I think they did come in a little under budget last year for that reason, actually.
Correct.
If I'm remembering, yep.
Just want to make sure it was still that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, you can continue.
This does have implication potentially, or it did, and so I do want to skip to the Human Development and Relationships Educator Work Plan. I've actually been very involved with Bob Rohrt in HHS and also Lisa Plunkett with child support on this. In developing this position, scoping it out, I was really excited about it because this is an example, I think, of how we've come together and really worked, with the county to deliver something that could really help and support the efforts here. This position, as of current, was on pause, and as of today, I did get confirmation that they will move forward with it. So we are delayed in our timeline, looking not to have this person start until April 15th. But nonetheless, the conversations really revolved around various departments and or entities that could best use this programming. This is a parenting program primarily and or financial literacy. And so you can see here, the biggest thing is to really grow a referral system so that folks within their systems and in their engaged, already identified receiving services could participate in our parenting program to further build capacity and support their future efforts. So this would include first public health, and you can see some of the examples of programming that might be included there in the italics. Also ADRC, there's some synergy there. We already work with them with our Strong Bodies program, but also caregiver support and the planning ahead, which is planning for end of life. Additionally, behavioral health, where we have literacy link, reentry focus, some of the focus on finances and Rent Smart program that we could offer. And then finally, for HHS Children's Services, here we have Parents Forever co-parenting program, fatherhood programming, focus on fathers, Triple P, and then also Fearless, which is a parenting program for those children with anxiety. Additionally, as mentioned, I worked with Lisa. They have a grant at current. They're in year 3 of 5, and at this point in junction, they're looking to help with capacity building once again. And so parenting program for those families that are dealing with domestic violence in their homes. This would potentially be the synergy point, the capacity building there. This would be our Parenting Forever co-parenting program. A lot of really good conversation, as mentioned, between Lisa and potentially Bob in the way that this individual could hopefully create a system of referral, but also help families navigate, because oftentimes they're traveling between these various programs and duplicating efforts. And so hopefully this would streamline that. So overall, for this position, what we're looking to do is obviously hire, and then before they even get on site, I can be working with Bob and or Lisa on that referral process, get them trained in a number of these programs so that they can start delivering by, I would say, easily by this summer. Questions on the HDR?
Go ahead.
So none of these programs have begun yet? You're in the planning stage yet? Okay, just one.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If there's no more questions on this, we'll continue.
And the only other educator then that this was applicable, because it was our understanding that 4-H would just continue to operate with status quo. And then the only other educator we have is our FoodWise, which there was no joint efforts, and also that's a non-contracted position, and so they continue to do their very prescribed curriculum and programming through those who qualify. The other individual, though, is Allison Sauter, our community development educator, 0.5 here with the county. And so her programming consists of working with organizations and leaders to build their capacity. So a number of situations here that she sort of came up with was the idea of growing a program for framework and qualitative data collection process, so learning how to do this. Along with that, also focus group training to help those government agencies that would like to, consider using this as a tactic and strategy. We have been working with HR to offer and grow a partnership, and so that Alice would lead a leadership course for those mid-management positions that have sort of escalated to the top and have not received maybe emerging sort of training for their leadership roles. And then, as always with Allison, and this has been in her scope of plan and plan of work throughout, is then additionally providing those technical assistance pieces direct. So anything such as the facilitation, such as leading focus groups, such as doing strategic plans, visioning exercises, hosting town hall meetings, et cetera, data collection and whatnot. She can also be leaned on for that. This is what I have for you tonight. Any questions?
So are these programs started yet, or are these still are planning?
Some of these, she's already doing them, but for outside stakeholders, and so she's looking to bring them in.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions or comments on this? I like the specific measurables myself. Comment, Supervisor Counter? No, you good? Looked like you had a thought.
Well, I like everything that you put into this, and it's well organized and well thought out. And I like the people that are using the programs. I like Health and Human Services being involved. All the areas and how you've approached this, I think, is really well done. So I want to thank you for the amount of time and input and working with staff and everybody to try to get this out.
I have to thank Ken for turning those folks in my direction, though, as well.
Go ahead.
I'm going to have to admit I'm a little bit disappointed. We're at the end of February, and really nothing much has been done yet. And maybe it's because you're short some staff. I understand that. Is it always like this? I mean, are you always that late in this late in the year to get started?
No, I would say this, they have been programming, but we haven't really had those synergy points yet with the county. So for example, Allison is offering programming, she has deliverables. I believe we sent a Q4 report out to the board, and so it indicated, those efforts. Obviously, Becky has also been, programming, and then she will be stepping away and so forth. So our efforts are ongoing. The biggest one is probably the HDR position. That's been slow in getting to fruition. And then obviously, it'll be the quickest uptick, I would say, in starting and onboarding that person, because we do have a ready-made audience and some venues already.
Do you have a 4-H leader
In place
in
right
staff?
now.
Okay, I was just wondering, because that was a really important thing for a lot of people.
Yep.
Probably the most important thing.
Yep.
I just wanted to make certain that that person hadn't walked or something like that.
No, we did have to refill that position because we did have that, our last educator resign as of July.
But it has been filled?
It has been filled. Mhm.
Yeah, so sort of the layout of this is, you guys are approving the work plan, which are the measurables, so that you're gonna be able to come back, late summer, early fall, and look back to say, okay, well, how much of this were you able to accomplish then? As we look to the 2026 budget, because it's, sort of the decision year. You wanna measure the progress and decide whether this is something that you wanna continue, if it's, cost effective for the county or not. So this work plan is very important, though, because it creates the measurable for later in the year. So if it's to your acceptance, we'd look for a motion then for approving it.
Yep.
I'll move that we accept the submitted UW Extension work plan.
All right, do we have a second? Supervisor Connor? Any further discussion, Supervisor Shirley?
I just have a question on your further right column of budget. What, I mean, obviously, those dollar amounts don't all add up into our budget for extension. So
Correct.
can you explain what each one of those indicate?
Sure.
A little better?
The overall budget primarily is consumed by contract. This here is just the operation to launch those programs. And so, for example, most of Allison's work, her training is already paid for, so this mainly is the walkaway that she might deliver at the time of a training. And so when you move into the HDR positions, the training piece there, it's a little heftier because that person will have to be completely trained, but approximately it's about $1,000-ish per program that they would be trained in.
Yeah, so the county does cover some operating costs for UW Extension also. So I think that's relatable to this. So it gives you an idea of what, besides the staff costs, what some of the other costs might be.
Any other comments, questions, clarifications from the committee? No, I'm ready for a vote. All right. I want to say I like all the, I'm going to have one comment myself and then we can vote, but I like all the measurables. I like the detail that's in them and kind of just the number of, I guess, things that are described here is very encouraging. With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed to the work plan? No. All right. That stands approved unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I just get a clarification then on the crops and soils? We do not want to continue, correct?
Oh, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, we'll continue it until she resigns, but I don't know that we want to fund it after April, right? Yeah. Okay.
It was a quarter-time FTE, and that was going to be my recommendation, is not to refill that.
Yeah.
Let it stay vacant for the rest of this year.
Do you want a motion on that?
We don't really need one, because we just won't take action to do it.
Sweet. Sounds good. Administratively, not fill it. Sounds good. Works for me.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right. Resolution approving, we'll move to business item 6, resolution approving the town of Hudson rezoning for 2.849 acres from residential to industrial.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members. The next item on your agenda tonight is a rezoning that took place in the town of Hudson. The town of Hudson has their own zoning ordinance, but the county must consent and approve to the rezoning to make it effective. In this particular case, the rezoning was approved by the board in January. It's for 2.85 acres. The address is 487 County Road A. I'll just get to a map here real quick. This is the survey map of the property. The subject parcels outlined in yellow. Currently, the parcel is zoned residential. The applicant requested the rezoning to go to an industrial designation. You see the existing structure on the site. Currently, the structure is being used as a auto parts repair and then storage rental. You'll see the other structure on the original property is a single-family home. Within the town, this parcel is located about a mile just north of the middle school here, where Carmichael Road transitions into County Road A. You can see the Union Pacific Railroad splitting off here into two different directions. The request is consistent with the town's comprehensive plan. It does guide this for future industrial. We reviewed the town's meeting notice requirements and found everything to be in order, so staff is recommending approval of the request.
Any questions? Can I get a motion? Go ahead.
I make a motion that we grant them the change from residential to an industrial as written.
To approve the resolution?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Right, to approve the.
Yeah. Supervisor Shirley with the second. Any discussion? All right. I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Carries unanimously. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Business item 7, resolution supporting the 2025 Wisconsin DNR recreational boating facilities grant application for Troy Beach.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're going to try to take and apply for the same 3 grants that we had really good success with last year within the Parks Division. And so the recreational boating facilities grant is a state-funded grant through the DNR. And one of the projects in that we think would be eligible would be some improvements to Troy Beach, and potentially in that having a kayak or canoe launch on the St. Croix. One of the new buzzwords in the Parks and Rec field is water trails. And so that is basically having multiple access points on a river or stream in particular, and that to take in and take out, And so with that, also being Troy Beach, it'd be nice to have a new ADA accessible bathroom facility there, and also like a changing room and that for any of the kayakers and that using the facility. And then also in that park right now is not ADA accessible. So we'd be looking to add an ADA accessible parking stall. And then also they've got these mats and that you can roll out down to the shoreline, and we'd be able to remove them, on that the fall, and that to make the beach ADA accessible going all the way out. And when I say with this kayak or canoe launch, really what it is it's just a very small dock platform close to shore, and that you're able to lay your kayak or canoe in, I'll call it a saddle, and that so that it's not moving around as you try to take and get in and out of that canoe or kayak. And so that is kind of one of the ideas that we've got. We were estimating the project cost for everything to be $145,000. If we were awarded the grant, and that the grant would cover 50% of it, and then we would use our current budget or even fund balance in that to cover those improvements. Overall, and that as part of this grant, we would also be, improving the existing facilities, and that the bathroom was built in the 70s. It's male, female, and so we're trying to use these grant opportunities to try to keep projects off the capital improvement plan of the county, and trying to tie in eligible projects in that make the application. So if there's any questions on it, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, we just need the committee's support to apply for that grant to the DNR.
Go ahead.
I'll move resolutions that we put forth, the resolution supporting 2025 Wisconsin DNR Recreational Boating Facilities Program Grant application for Troy Beach.
Do I have a second? Supervisor Shirley, any discussion? All right, with that said, ready for vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? None. Carries unanimously. All right, now, the fun thing. Discussion on the Excel Solar Project, business item 8.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take this one as well. So at the February County Board meeting, Rebecca Roker with Atoli's Law presented to the county board, and then at the end of that presentation, they directed the Community Development Committee to take and kind of handle the Excel Solar Project. And so since that meeting, we have gotten feedback from Excel that they might entertain participating in a joint developers agreement. And so we wanted to take and make sure that we were accurately representing the concerns or comments of the county board and the committee. So in this background memo, I've went through the January county board meeting where Brian Elwood from Excel presented, and then also the February meeting, tried to summarize all the comments of the county board. I broke it into concerns and that, I'm not sure that that's the right word, but basically this top bullet point list, maybe there's provisions in a joint developers agreement that could maybe be addressed in that to help some of these concerns. Whereas the comments on the bottom and that those are more, just like informational requests, and that are more curiosity stuff that we probably can't regulate necessarily in a joint developers agreement. And so I'll just go through the concerns first. The first one also comes from our highway department. It's a road use agreement for temporary and long-term accesses. So just making sure that during the construction phase and stuff that their accesses are permitted and in safe locations. If needed, that there would be a traffic impact analysis completed on it as well. Decommissioning or financial assurance, the county board had called it retirement, and that at the end of the panel's life. But that is just to make sure that there is financial assurance to restore the landscape back to the current ag condition, basically by removing the panels. Environmental and stormwater concerns, and that with any storms that come through, any contaminants maybe that would be in the panels that could potentially leak. So that would be one thing. Emergency responder training, having some local input with the joint developers agreement, and I believe that would also, or I believe the county board is also wanting that to include towns, and that so that they would have an opportunity to have some input. The next one, impact on municipalities, comprehensive plans, and future guidance for development. So if this area was close to maybe New Richmond or something like that, and the town had it guided for housing development, how does that work with their comprehensive plan and how they want their municipality to grow? So. Also in that, the Excel maps that have been provided have kind of been vague, but a lot of that area is maybe in prime farmland. Is there ways to mitigate the impact on that to the farmland potentially? We've also received feedback from Van Dyke Farms, and that this is on the transmission line itself, not necessarily of the solar fields. But they are concerned about stray voltage around their animals. And so they've got kind of two different alternative routes. One kind of goes right in front of their front yard, and the other one kind of goes back through the field, but it's a lot closer to the barns and stuff. And so they would prefer, to have that transmission line in their front door and that are in the front of their property and that to try to mitigate any stray voltage to their animals. And then is there any compensation mitigation that could be done? So like buffers maybe along a housing development, is there any kind of noise or dust mitigation, glare, that kind of stuff. Is there any other ones that are ringing out in that for the committee that maybe we could work on in a joint developers agreement or?
Yeah, go ahead. Where's the counter and then Van Summeren?
You brought up the panels, when the panels are done and at the end of life on the panels for getting rid of them, but I didn't hear if you had stated in there also the structural, because with the panels, you also have all the metal fabrication that holds the panels in place and the concrete in the ground that holds the posts in place and any wiring or things that are traipsed through. If you got to address those too.
Correct. Yep, and that would, yeah, decommissioning in general, and that what we've been seeing on these panels is we've got some engineer estimates that show that the salvage value of the panels is quite high, and they're actually showing net positive in the decommissioning. Now, if that's true or not, how do you know? But you got to argue with a professional engineer that's stamped off on it. But that's what we're currently seeing on some of these smaller ones, is that they're showing almost a net positive of $1 million to decommission. And so that would be, something there to look at. So.
Interesting you say that, because just recently on a television news thing from Arizona, they showed piles and piles and piles of these things that are spent, and there's no value, and they're setting out in the desert. So I'm just guessing somebody paid somebody to say that, because I can't imagine it's any different there than it is that's going to be here.
Right. So, yeah, and I don't know in that, but that would at least be something to talk about in that throughout this. And in the ordinance, and that we do have decommissioning saying that you got to have 2 estimates, and then it's the average of the 2 to try to mitigate some of those differences.
I think there's a few more things that we have to add to that list, Jason.
Okay.
First of all, weed control. Oops, excuse me, I'll let you get your.
Okay. Yep.
Weed and foliage control. I'm not certain what they do. I go into Minnesota quite often, and they have some fairly large, not this large, but a couple 100 acres at a crack, and it's weeds. It's weeds 4 or 5 feet tall underneath them, and which would, first of all, possibly be a fire hazard, because as the weeds dry out, the bottom of those solar cells is red hot, and that's where the inverter is. And yeah, that's a concern. So there should be something that we have to know what they're going to do with the foliage. Are they just going to let it grow up? Are they going to spray it? And then if they spray it, the runoff, up in the area where they're looking at, there's the beginning of which river? Willow River, Rush River, one of those rivers runs right through there. We need to have something that says, look, we're taking care of that. We're not going to. So that's one. Also, one thing that we haven't mentioned yet is reflection on solar panels, depending on which side you live on them. That can be very bright. I happen to have a nephew who has a solar cell on his roof, lives in Woodville, but Woodville is on a hill, so other neighbors live above him, and they have to close their drapes because of reflection off of that. I think it's, whatever, sometime of the day it shines in there. That's one thing. Also, the heat reflection, because they will reflect heat. So if you're living in that vicinity, you could experience more temperature, because it's glass, it's like any glass. And runoff, I think we've already talked about, again, because of that river right there. So I think those things that are things that need looking at.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to mention too is the some type of agreement on battery storage, because some type of understanding that they'll be separated so that one fire won't start 6 or 60. Go ahead.
That was my topic, was battery storage. Is my understanding is within the long-term scope of this. And I think it's not only because the risk is what they call lithium ion what do they call it, where there's the rapid fire. And it's not just the fire containment, but how they contain the suppression, because that runoff then becomes toxic. So I think the more sophisticated battery storage operations have essentially a capture basin for any fire or fire suppression efforts. So that would need to be coordinated with our local emergency systems.
I can speak to that a bit. So at the last XL meeting that I was at, yeah, you were there too. They talked about a new type of battery that they're using, which is called an iron water battery. Basically, it's a rust battery, and it stores energy in the rust. So the bottom of your car, that's probably a good place to store energy. Here are some good things about it. All it uses is water and something similar to taconite, maybe even taconite. There's nothing volatile about that. If they have to add more, it's just more iron and more water. And there's absolutely no fire possibility because it's water and iron, and neither one burns. So they have, the last time they talked to us, they said that their Sherco plant, which is up around Montevideo, that's scheduled for a test of that kind of a battery. Will not be hooked to a solar cell, but it'll be hooked to a power line, and they'll just do the testing on that. But it shows some really positive things, and if that happens, that's going to take away a lot of the fear. What you're talking about, because what you're talking about is very real. Yeah.
So would the committee like to see if they would have a preference in that, or that if we could prefer an iron water battery over lithium?
Well, if you recall, they're in the test. They're building a test plant there, and I think it's too early to say about that.
Yeah. Currently, they're saying that they're not even going to have battery storage, but
Not in St. Croix County.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have emergency responder training. I think we should have something a little more like emergency coordination plan, something like that.
We would probably have an emergency action plan developed for the facility anyways, because we do for many manufacturing facilities around the county.
Yeah, it's supposed to be in the PSC submittal, but.
I understand the point. We probably will have that, though.
Right. I think it's all I have.
Do you need a motion, or you're just looking for general direction?
Yeah, I think what we're looking for here is Jason, Heather, and I are going to be meeting with Xcel Energy next week to start that conversation. So how I see this working out is we have the first conversation with them, engage their interest in developing a development agreement with us, identifying what the variables are that they're willing to negotiate on and the ones that they're not willing to negotiate on, and really come back to you then and say, okay, well, here's really like what a first draft might look like. Is this what you guys want? And then going from there to determine whether, yes, we're going to do a joint development agreement. We think we can address a lot of our concerns that way, or no, we don't want to. We want to go a different direction. So that's kind of what's going to happen. The one big question I had for you was local input. We had talked at the last county board meeting about having a joint meeting with multiple other municipalities. When do you want that to happen so we can get that scheduled? It seems like earlier on is probably better, so.
Yeah, go ahead. Any suggestions would be?
I would say at this point, probably somewhere in May or in April. I would say we could try, trying to get schedules coordinated. I don't think we'll pull that off in March, so.
So local, we're not up for reelection this year. I'm not up any year, but you're not.
Maybe towards the end of April. How about that?
Yeah.
The last half of April.
Yeah, a lot of the other jurisdictions will have elections this April. So April 1, there might be some new faces, but maybe towards the end, April might be good, towards the end of April. And then I was thinking of having it at the highway facility in their large meeting room there.
Just getting back to the timing question, my understanding was that there is this detailed application Excel has to complete, and that the target is July. So maybe our request is to see if we can have that meeting before that is complete filing? Question mark?
I guess in my opinion, I understand the concern, but it'd be a little bit jumping the gun to do it when there's going to be some turnover on some of those local attendees. April. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see both sides of that. I mean, we could try to do something, you know, middle of March at the earliest, but late April is probably much more doable.
Yeah, I mean, especially with you guys still are planning on going forward with the conversation, like a first look at what that might look like. Maybe we'd have some example of what it might look like to show them for that April meeting. And then we'd be a little bit further along and it'd be a little less convoluted, maybe. In my head, at least. Yeah.
I think at that point, you know, we'll have another meeting before that. We'll know what Excel has to say when you meet with them, and Heather will be able to talk more about joint development agreements, and we can further discuss that before we meet with them, so.
Sounds good.
That sound like a plan though for you guys?
Yeah.
Sound okay?
Yep.
That's all I need.
That's all you need.
So,
All right.
Yep, I've got all the additional concerns that I won't repeat them, but I wrote them down exactly as you mentioned, so.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank
Okay.
you, Jason. I think this was helpful for sure. All right, Ken. Financial report. Everything's 200% green.
Well, we'll see. I like to take, you know, maybe just a half an hour here and go through the budget. All right. So I'm actually, this is the.
That's it?
Yeah, this is the January report. I'm not going to go through January. I actually just wanted to highlight very quickly through each of the different cost centers the fiscal year 24 column, because these are pretty close to end numbers. There's maybe a few grants and stuff outstanding. All right, so Register of Deeds. So they hit their $1 million in revenue. They ended up 139,000 in the black. So looking at that column, that's what I'm looking at. Recycling, they ended 1370, just positive. Looking at hazardous waste, they were 2,000 positive. That's good. The Parks Department, so they're ending just $7,000 negative. They have their own fund balance, and so it pulls from that fund balance. And as Jason had mentioned before, they're looking at doing some projects and pulling more out of that fund balance in the future as we start to work on parks and try to avoid using KIP projects for that. So
I can add too, just if I might, Ken, and that, but we did receive another check from the snowmobile grant, and that all of our grants and that it seemed like they kind of lagged behind, but that was about 16,000, so that number should actually be in the black now. So,
all right, back in the black. All right. Fairgrounds, that's 0. UW Extension, they finished 22,000 in the black. Again, when they have vacancies, we don't pay them. Resource Land and Water, they are 140,000 in the red. And so it was the cost sharing. I think they're probably outstanding grants coming in on that yet.
yeah, we've got about 158,000 in that we're waiting from the state. So that money has not been affected by the federal grants, and so we should still be hopefully getting that by the end of the month so we can roll that back to last year. But that number is so far in the red because you can see 2023 we only did $223,000 in cost share, and 2024 there was 406,000. And so in other words, they had a fantastic year. We're going to get that money back. Hopefully it's in time so we can roll it back.
All right, so we'll get back to black also. We have planning, land records, there's 74,000 red. They typically are. We have a fund balance applied line. It doesn't show up there because fund balance applied is just you finish in the red. So we budget for that. We plan for them to finish in the red, usually right around 70,000. And so they're pretty much right on target with where we thought they would be. and they're using their own fund balance on that. This fund balance is getting a little low, though, so we need to keep track of that. The zoning department then, look down, they're 128,000 in the black. That's good. And then economic development, $943. These are just these bank service charges, which will continue to run in the red on those because that's for that loans. As soon as those loans close out, then that'll go away. But that's the financial report. Were there any questions on any of those? Otherwise, overall, it's looking pretty good.
I have a question, not on this, but with all of the scuttlebutt about the federal money being withheld or paused or cut back, how does the county look? Are we getting any, are we concerned about grants that aren't going to come through or money that's not going to come through to us and how are we going to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, there are some direct federal funding sources that we have. Our Emergency Operations Center had received about $450,000 congressional funding, direct congressional funding. And so that was paused and then unpaused, I think, within 24 hours. But we're watching those types of things. And just because they were paused doesn't mean they're going to go away. It just means they're being reevaluated. And something like EOC funding, I really don't think that the change in administration is going to change the priority for emergency operations. So I don't have any concern about that. Indirectly, Medicare and Medicaid funding do fund a lot of the programs through Health and Human Services. They fund the nursing home. So as those programs are analyzed and looked at, we could see some changes there. It'll be passed from the federal government to the state government on to us, and then we pass it on to the people that those programs are serving. So, but we're monitoring at this point. Nothing has changed yet.
Any other questions for Ken on the financial report? No. All right. Future agenda items.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I can jump on this one. So at the last meeting, Supervisor Rice had asked for the water quality presentation, and that was done back in 2017. So that'll be on the March meeting. So March meeting, I'm planning on being kind of heavy on land and water. So we will have that on there. We will also have the new soil test pilot program that we're trying on that agenda. Supervisor Shirley had asked and that for an update from St. Croix Economic Development Corporation. I reached out to Melissa. March didn't work for her, but April she is planning on being here, and I didn't think it was a rush. So anyway, so that's kind of those future agenda items. And then I'm working for Scott on some GIS mapping that he talked about. So that'll be after that, though. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's probably assumed, but just so we have a future agenda item to continue our discussion on the Excel solar for next month, especially if we're going to be doing a meeting in April.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, when are you meeting with him, with Excel?
Next week, Thursday.
Okay, so we should have the results of that meeting unless you email that to us quicker. But
Yeah, usually by Friday morning. Yeah.
I suppose. I'll give you till noon. I don't look at mine till evening. So.
Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's an initial meeting, so I mean, I don't know really what to expect from it, but whatever comes from it, I'll let you guys know.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Well, I've got an announcement.
Oh, yeah, announcements.
Yeah, and so the St. Croix Economic Development Corporation is holding their annual banquet next Thursday night, February 27th at 5 p.m. And it looks like we've got a few extra tickets or spots available in that if anybody's interested. No? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, sorry, I guess we don't, so. Because today was that she was telling me that we did, but anyway, okay. Right. Yep. Okay. For board members. Okay. Also, I handed out a letter that was sent out to all the adjoining property owners on the Wildwood Trail. There was the easement, and that has been in the works for a long time because we had to survey the whole Wildwood Trail corridor to get an actual meets and bounds description with the different right-of-way widths. So that easement was recorded on February 7th, and then the letter was followed up and that out to each property owner with what the rights of the trail were. And then there was a link in that they could view and that full easement adds. So that is sent out. And that's all I've got.
Question for you. Does this close out the Wildwood Trail issues? Well done, thank you.
So there's still an appeal and that with the Osleys on it. So that's still going through that, but the easement and the adjoining landowner issue and that is done now. So, yep.
All right. Announcement?
Well, kind of, yeah. Question.
Turn on your microphone.
So, we had on the admin committee meeting, we had the issue with position that we are changing up because of the statutory changes for the ag rep. And my question is, are we going to post that then, or what'll be the process for that for the future?
Yeah, that citizen position would be a county administrator appointment subject to confirmation by the county board. I'm going to wait until the I'm going to wait until the county board approves the change, and then I'll worry about it.
All right. Anything else? All right. Record time for the last 3 months. We're out before 8. This is adjourned.